Drusilla Talbot placed the small russet leather purse into Montague's open hands. £20 is sufficient for the water pump, Your Grace. The remaining £480 are yours. Around them 6 ladies in pale blue, cream, lavender and primrose held purses carrying the same £500 estate allowance. Drusilla, a young widow in mourning, Black had kept only the sum named in her estimate. "Money may save a roof," she said, "but I will not allow it to choose that roof's master." Montague did not close his fingers over the purse. "You should keep the balance, Mrs. Talbot. Mortimer Langley may press his claim upon your cottage before the week is out." The brass clasp of Drusilla's own emptied purse clicked beneath her thumb. 3 ladies stopped whispering at once. "Are you speaking as patron of Elmsworth Village?" she asked, as a future creditor, or as a man hoping to purchase my gratitude. His gaze moved briefly from her face to the circle watching them. Then he turned enough for every woman in the yellow Brighton drawing room to hear him. "Unused allocations returned to the estate account. Mrs. Talbot has saved the village £480. No rebuke, no wounded ducal pride." The silence changed. He lowered his voice again. "Tomorrow I can offer 3 other arrangements, none connected with this money. You may refuse all 3. Then I shall hear all 3. At 10 the next morning, in the small morning room of Drusilla's lodgings, Montague laid 3 sheets upon the writing table with equal space between them. First, an examination of Mr. Talbot's estate accounts. No money from me. Second, the same examination with an advance of £300 at 4% repaid only from estate rents or sale proceeds. Third, I give you the name of an independent London solicitor and withdraw from the matter." Drusilla touched the middle sheet. "The second. I retain all dealings with the creditors." "Agreed." The solicitor's draft arrived before noon. One clause permitted further payment at His Grace's discretion. Drusilla struck it through and wrote above it, "Only upon written request of the executrix." Montague read the alteration. "That may prevent me from acting quickly." "Yes?" His mouth shifted almost a smile. "Then it is well written." By the time the sand had dried the ink, Drusilla had her first useful answer. The Duke's money could enter her husband's estate without acquiring a claim upon her judgment. Her next question was harder. Would the Duke remember that when watching her lose? 2 days later, Mr. Higgins, a London tradesman, sat opposite Drusilla, with his calling card face down between them. Montague had come only to compare figures, yet Higgins kept looking past her toward the Duke. There it was, the calculation she had expected. Higgins believed the powerful man in the room must also be the man who would decide whether he was paid. Drusilla let him look. "Your eldest son begins his apprenticeship next month, does he not?" Higgins turned back to her, guarded now. "He does." "Then you require money soon, not a quarrel that leaves us both paying solicitors. I can settle 1/3 today, and the remainder in 3 months. His eyes flicked to Montague again, waiting for a guarantee. Montague said nothing. The surprise on Higgins's face was slight but unmistakable. The Duke was not going to rescue the conversation from the widow sitting opposite him. "A considerable indulgence," Higgins said. "A practical one." A servant appeared with the card of Drusilla's next caller. Montague glanced at the clock. "Mrs. Talbot, shall that appointment be put back half an hour?" "Yes." Higgins made his decision before the servant reached the door. 1/3 today, the rest in 3 months. "Then we agree." When Higgins rose, the bow he gave. Drusilla was deeper than the one with which he had entered. Only afterward did he turn to Montague. Afterward, Montague gathered the account sheets. "You gave him a reason to accept without losing face. Most people require one, and you have 35 minutes before the next caller. I know. You may use 5 to eat." Drusilla gave him a look. "Or I shall interfere with the kitchen instead." She almost laughed. "Bread and cheese. The kitchen may keep its post." The following afternoon they drove inland to Elmsworth Village, to inspect the pump for which Drusilla had kept her £20. The last rain still lay in the ruts. 2 children abandoned a hoop when the Duke's carriage appeared, then crept back as soon as they decided adults were occupied elsewhere. The pump stood beside a row of cottages. Its iron handle answered Montague's trial with a miserable squeal. "The estimate is sound," he said after speaking with the smith. "New leather repair to the rod work at the well mouth. £20 should cover it. Then my extravagance is vindicated. Your economy has caused trouble in Brighton. Lady Vickers proposes a wrought iron gate for the tenant yard that floods each November the same." A woman at the nearest cottage waited with 2 pails, pretending not to listen. Behind her, the yard in question sloped toward a ditch that plainly needed more attention than ornament. Drusilla looked at the folded estimate in Montague's hand. Giving every lady exactly £500 makes each of them feel she must discover a £500 need. I meant the equal sums to prevent favoritism. I know, but equality of allowance is becoming competition in display. Offer up to 500. Require an estimate first. Return what is unused and do not announce who spent the least. My steward will curse the extra paper. Your steward is paid to survive paper. Montague glanced toward the listening woman, then back at the pump. And the gate may wait until the yard does not become a pond. He folded the estimate once. Up to 500 then. Estimate first. No parade of total, no defense, no insistence that good intentions deserved protection from criticism. Drusilla had spent months meeting men who regarded money as proof of superior understanding. Arrogance was easy. One braced against it. This was more troublesome. "What?" Montague asked. She realized she had been looking at him. "Nothing, Your Grace. An alarming answer from you." She turned toward the carriage before he could see the smile she had failed to prevent. By the second week, the late Mr. Talbot's possessions had begun to leave Drusilla's cottage in orderly groups. The silver went first. Her maid set the heavy pieces upon green felt, while Genevieve Ravenscroft, Drusilla's widowed cousin, watched from the window. He was proud of that service, Genevieve said. "That does not make it useful." Drusilla tied a paper tag to the coffee pot. Her husband had liked objects that announced their cost before anyone asked whether the bill had been paid. The service had presided over dinners at which he promised solvency to men who now arrived with folded accounts and tight mouths. She felt no duty to preserve that habit in silver. Montague entered carrying a carrier's list rather than a purse. "The wagon can take the dining room furniture Thursday. The valuer asks about the mahogany sideboard. Sell it. The chairs, keep them. I use them." He marked the list. A servant had set aside a pair of ormolu candlesticks because they had been a wedding gift. Drusilla returned them to the sale table. Genevieve lifted an eyebrow. "I remember the wedding without assistance," Drusilla said. Montague's pencil moved again, no faster and no slower. Only at the small walnut desk near the wall did Drusilla hesitate. "This remains. I bought it before my marriage with money left to me by an aunt. Every useful letter I have written since Mr. Talbot died was written there." Montague crossed it from the list without asking whether the memory was sufficiently noble. That was the difference she kept noticing. He did not make her defend every choice merely because he possessed the means to replace what she surrendered. By Thursday the rooms were bara. The missing silver left pale shapes in the cabinet lining. The sideboard's absence exposed scratches on the wall. Yet the cottage seemed less haunted by another person's taste. Object by object it was becoming hers. The following week they prepared the catalogue for the private sale. Genevieve looked over her embroidery and said, "If His Grace raised one eyebrow at the auction half, Brighton would double its bids." Drusilla's hand stopped. Then it would cease to be a sale. Montague immediately drew a line through his own name on the bidder list. "I am saved from buying the porcelain hounds. You said yesterday they resembled diseased sheep. I have reconsidered their importance. You are forbidden to reconsider them with money. Cruel. Then he turned the page and found the gilt shepherdess clock. No, it has value. It has committed offences. The clock stood on a side table as if waiting to hear sentence: gold scrolls, china roses, one blank porcelain lamb, and a shepherdess whose expression suggested she too regretted being there. Drusilla placed it between two desirable porcelain lots. That is entrapment, Montague said. It is arrangement. If no one bids, Mrs. Talbot, do not expect me to rescue you from that clock. What happened to practical care? It has limits. Genevieve laughed first. Drusilla followed before she could make the sound proper. For several seconds the room held no debt, no dead husband, no question of dependence, only the shepherdess and Montague's grave refusal to share a roof with her. When their eyes met, his amusement softened. The silence after laughter was not uncomfortable. That was new too. Drusilla looked back at the catalogue first and moved the clock to lot 17. Coward, Montague said. Strategist. The private sale took place in the 4th week. Drusilla had chosen a room large enough for good buyers without making a modest attendance look thin. Genevieve received the earliest guests. Montague kept to carriage timing, servants and doors, and never stood near the broker when a bid faltered. 2 creditor agents arrived together and began speaking just loudly enough for the words distressed estate to travel. Drusilla heard the phrase once and understood the intended effect. If buyers believed the sale desperate, every low bid would appear sensible. If creditors believed the Duke must soon intervene, every demand would harden. She did not challenge the men. She altered the seating. One agent found himself beside a gentleman who despised conspicuous greed. The other sat opposite an elderly collector who asked blunt questions of anyone bidding against her. At Drusilla's signal, Genevieve mentioned the silversmith's mark on the coffee service. The first agent raised his bid rather than appear predatory. The collector raised hers. The room forgot to be distressed. From the doorway, Montague caught Drusilla's eye. A fresh group had just arrived in the passage. He delayed them with coffee until the silver lot closed, keeping the room full enough to feel confident, but not crowded enough to lose attention. He did not bid once. The service sold above valuation. So did the sideboard. The porcelain hounds found an admirer in a baronet's wife, who pronounced them full of character. The gilt shepherdess clock received one reluctant bid. Genevieve released a quiet breath beside Drusilla. Montague looked at Drusilla with such solemn relief that she had to lower her face to the catalogue. By dusk, the broker's figures showed enough to discharge 2 major legitimate debts in full. After the last guest left, Drusilla walked through the spaces where furniture had been. Her husband had filled rooms because emptiness offended him. She found she liked a clear wall, a useful chair, and the knowledge of exactly what remained. No one had been paid to save her. The money came from property she had chosen to sell, at prices other people had chosen to offer. Absence, she discovered, could feel like room to move. A week later, exhaustion found the place Priam had left undefended. Drusilla sat before a cold supper with the remaining creditor list open beside her. Genevieve had gone upstairs. One lamp burned near the accounts. The rest of the room had receded into shadow. Montague entered after speaking with the estate clerk, and took in the untouched plate, the closed inkstand, and the same figure marked twice in Drusilla's hand. "You have no appointment before 10 tomorrow," he said. "I can move that one to noon." "Do so. Then the morning is yours." She should have felt relieved. Instead, the empty hours seemed like another thing to defend. The silence waited. "I must keep the cottage," Drusilla said at last. "It is the first place I ever chose. The curtains, the desk, the roses by the wall. None of them were selected by my father or my husband. I chose them." Montague stayed by the hearth. He did not move closer simply because she had spoken softly. "Then the accounts must answer the cottage." He said, "Not the cottage, the accounts. No offer to buy it. No promise that rank could make danger disappear. That restraint reached her more deeply than any grander kindness might have done. Eat, he added. She looked up. That was self-interest. If you faint tomorrow, I shall have to explain these books to everyone myself, and that frightens you terribly. You ask questions. She cut a piece of cold mutton. You may stay until I finish. He sat opposite her. They discussed the village smith, the porcelain hounds, and whether Genevieve had secretly encouraged the clock's buyer. None of it advanced a single account. For 10 minutes, Drusilla was not an executrix defending an estate. She was merely a woman enjoying the company of a man she had not yet decided to trust with anything more dangerous than conversation. The rupture came the next afternoon. A creditor who had been expected to arrive angry entered Drusilla's parlour, smiling. I must thank His Grace, he said. The £60 was most promptly settled. Drusilla's fingers closed around the russet purse on the table. Click. She had needed the man dissatisfied. Not ruined, not threatened, only dissatisfied enough to complain where Mortimer Langley would hear him. Mortimer had been probing the estate from a distance. If he believed one ordinary creditor still pressed hard, he might reveal which of Mr. Talbot's confused accounts he considered most valuable. A creditor paid by the Duke told another story entirely. Press the widow, and Elmsworth would pay. Drusilla made herself ask 2 ordinary questions about the receipt. The man's answers confirmed what she already knew. Montague had paid him the previous afternoon. She dismissed him courteously. Only then did she write 2 short notes, one altering a call and one asking Genevieve not to repeat the creditor's thanks. There was no recovering the lost position, but there was still a difference between 1 rumour and 6. When the notes had gone, Drusilla entered the writing room. You paid him. Montague rose. He threatened to confront you in front of Genevieve. I needed him displeased. His expression changed. I needed Mortimer to believe I was cornered by that demand, she said. Now he will hear that you quietly purchase my difficulties. You spared me 1 scene and cost me bargaining ground I had spent days arranging. I thought the public embarrassment was worse than a plan you did not know existed. He stopped. Drusilla heard the sharpness in her own voice and lowered it not for his comfort, but for precision. The clause I struck from your draft existed for this exact reason. Montague looked toward the folder containing the promissory note. I agreed not to pay a creditor without your written request. Yes. I broke that agreement. No defense followed. No appeal to intention. He pulled a clean sheet toward him. The £60 will be entered as an additional drawing under the existing 4% advance. The receipt will be issued in your name. I shall write to the creditor that I acted without authority from the executrix, and my steward and clerk will receive the same instruction. That will not give me back the position. No. The answer landed harder, because he did not soften it. I cannot repair that part, he said. I can make certain the payment is not represented as a gift, and I can stop myself from repeating it. Drusilla watched him begin the letter. He was willing to look foolish to a tradesman to admit that a duke had exceeded permission because restoring the truth mattered more than preserving his dignity. Her anger remained. Beside it came a more inconvenient feeling. Relief. I will not approach another creditor, Montague said, unless you name the man and the purpose. Drusilla looked down at the purse. Inside were receipts, due dates, and the memorandum of his advance. She had demanded that his money be made legible. Her own plan had not been. I used Genevieve because I did not want to tell you I was afraid, she said. Montague put down the pen. I arranged the calls so Mortimer would believe he knew exactly how weak the estate was. I told you pieces, never the sequence. Why? Because information is easier to risk than trust. She opened a drawer and laid a folded list of dates and appointments before him. That was strategy, she said. Not trust. Here is the whole plan. He did not ask her to forgive him. He read the first lines and asked, What remains usable enough? But I intend to discover whether you can remain inside one part of it. The test came the following day. Drusilla handed Montague a sealed summary concerning an upholsterer. Verify the figures. Confirm the present payment date. Do not extend it, offer new security, or promise anything from property not already named. Figures and date. Nothing else. She stayed home. At 11, she nearly sent Genevieve to the upholsterer's rooms on an invented errand. She even wrote the first line of the note before seeing what she was doing. She tore it across. At 11:15, she rearranged 3 letters on her desk. At past, she walked to the window, returned, and reminded herself that delegation which one secretly supervised was merely control wearing a polite bonnet. By noon, Montague returned and placed a plain sheet on the table. The figures agree. The date remains. He offered another fortnight voluntarily if the first payment arrives on time. I said only that I would report the offer to you. Nothing else, nothing else. Drusilla read the page once. She did not reopen the negotiation behind him. That small act of inaction felt more difficult than half the interviews she had conducted herself. Will you stay to dinner? His surprise pleased her. As your accountant, as a guest. If I stay, some people will call it gratitude. Some people called my returned £480 an insult. Brighton survives interpretation. A smile appeared. I do not pay debts with dinner, Drusilla said. I am asking because I want your company. There were no account books on the dining table that evening. Genevieve sat in the adjoining room with the connecting door open near enough to satisfy anyone determined to count propriety and far enough not to hear every quiet word. Montague began by reporting that the gilt shepherdess clock now stood beneath a family portrait in the buyer's entrance hall. An injury to ancestry, Drusilla said. To art. To visitors. They argued the point over soup. Later the amusement faded, but not the ease. Drusilla traced the rim of her glass. I will not choose a future while another man can wave a paper and claim my home. I know. If I refuse you later, the loan remains at 4%. Yes, you will not transform it into a wedding gift. No, you answer very quickly. I have been studying. She lowered her gaze because he had made tenderness sound practical, which was unfair. I may want you, she said. The words were harder than any demand she had made of a creditor. Montague did not reach across the table. Then I shall hope. I shall not collect. Genevieve entered several minutes later carrying a note sealed by Mortimer Langley. The wax was still warm. Mortimer came 2 days afterward in an immaculate brown coat and laid a folded account upon the hall table. This bears Mr. Talbot's signature, he said. It assigns the cottage lease to me as security for the outstanding partnership deficit. You have 48 hours to acknowledge it, or I shall seek possession. Genevieve went pale. Drusilla did not touch the paper immediately. Mortimer had addressed her, but once the threat was spoken, his gaze moved past her shoulder to Montague, who had entered from the morning room. For one instant she saw calculation cross Montague's face, amount danger, quickest way to remove both. Then he looked at her. Mrs. Talbot, which part do you wish me to verify the bank entries and partnership sums? Leave Mr. Langley to me. Mortimer gave a short laugh. Surely His Grace and I may settle a financial matter without troubling you over every column. No. Drusilla picked up the account. I do not surrender property in a hallway. You will dine here tomorrow evening. Bring every memorandum upon which you rely. There will be a solicitor and an accountant present. Mortimer looked again to Montague. Montague merely inclined his head. The next day tested them both. Montague found an August bank entry with an unclear abbreviation and brought it directly to Drusilla rather than trying to settle its meaning privately. This appears to discharge the partnership balance, he said. I will not call it proof until the banker's book confirms it. Drusilla's first impulse was to keep her questioning sequence to herself. She heard the excuse forming too many people could spoil a careful room and recognized the old habit beneath it. "Sit down." She showed him the seating plan. "You will be one place to my right. The solicitor opposite Mortimer. Do not show the August entry when he first challenges the debt. When I ask, Your Grace, the figures. If he changes the date, let him finish." A messenger knocked below with the banker's confirmation. Montague rose, then paused. The whole plan. This time, yes. The dinner began at 7. 6 people sat at the table: Drusilla Mortimer Genevieve, an independent solicitor, an accountant, and Montague. Drusilla took the head place. Montague sat one seat to her right. Mortimer noticed. He tried twice during the first course to draw Montague into estate business. Montague answered politely and briefly. When the plates were cleared, Mortimer's patience gave way. "Mrs. Talbot, shall we admit that the question is whether His Grace means to satisfy the claim?" Drusilla set down her fork. "No. The question is whether there is a claim to satisfy. The assignment is signed. Then explain its chronology. When did my husband assign the cottage in September, when the partnership deficit became clear? Before or after the 12th? Before, I believe. In October you told Mr. Higgins that my husband remained responsible for only half the partnership deficit. A casual remark. A precise one. Why would only half remain after the whole deficit had supposedly been secured upon the cottage? Mortimer glanced toward Montague. Accounts alter. What altered? An August payment failed. The accountant's pencil moved. You have just said the deficit became clear in September. The effect is the same. Not if you ask me to surrender a lease. Mortimer turned to Montague. Your Grace, I am prepared to settle this quietly. Montague rested one hand beside his wine-glass. If you have a proposal concerning Mrs. Talbot's property, make it to Mrs. Talbot. Mortimer colored. Drusilla waited. The assignment is dated the 14th of September, he said at last. You told us it was before the 12th. I said I believed. You are uncertain of the date of the document, by which you intend to take my home within 48 hours. The solicitor looked up. Mortimer reached for his account. This is absurd. Drusilla placed 2 fingers on her own copy. Your Grace. The figures. Only then did Montague move. He laid the authenticated banker's entry before the accountant. The partnership draft was honored on the 28th of August. The banker's book and the estate books record the same discharge. Mrs. Talbot's later £300 advance from me is entered separately. The accountant compared the entries. If this September assignment secures the same partnership sum, Montague said it duplicates a balance already discharged. There may have been another balance, Mortimer said. Then name it, Drusilla replied. Name the amount when it arose and the book in which it appears. You say an August payment failed. It did not. You have given 2 dates for the assignment. In October you described only half a deficit. Which account do you ask this table to believe? No one answered for him. At last Mortimer said, There has been an error in my office. Does your claim upon the cottage remain a long pause? No. State that for the solicitor. Mortimer signed the withdrawal and left before dessert. There was no applause. The solicitor read the withdrawal aloud and, at Drusilla's direction, recorded the remaining legitimate creditors under the existing schedule. The cottage is not to be offered as further security, she said. It is not, the solicitor confirmed. He gave Drusilla a small, deliberate nod before returning to his notes. Drusilla folded her copy of Mortimer's account once and slid it to the far edge of the table. It no longer occupied the place before her, and His Grace's advance remains under its existing terms, unchanged, Montague said. Only then did the pressure inside Drusilla ease. The cottage was secure because Mortimer's claim had failed before witnesses, not because Montague had purchased it away. Later, with Genevieve in the adjoining drawing room and the library door ajar. Montague stood by the fireplace. I shall leave, he said. If you need the accounts tomorrow, send word. Otherwise, I shall not call. Drusilla set the russet purse upon the table and removed the receipt for his advance. The terms remain 4%. Yes. The repayment dates remain yes. If I never marry you, yes. She closed the purse. For one cold instant, marriage seemed capable of putting every room she had reclaimed beneath another man's name again. Then Montague reached for his gloves, preparing to leave, because she had not invited him to stay, and Drusilla remembered that he had asked for neither the cottage nor her answer. Tomorrow come without the accounts. His breath changed. As your neighbor, Drusilla crossed the room and placed her hand lightly on his forearm. He did not meet her halfway. As the man I may choose to marry, she said, provided he learns to keep out of my kitchen accounts. I have no ambition to govern your kitchen. You cannot tell a pastry brush from a shaving brush. That allegation lacks evidence. It can be arranged. His laugh was soft. His hand covered hers. The kiss was brief because Genevieve was next door, and because Drusilla wanted it brief. It was the first thing she had given him that required no entry in any book. 6 months later, sharp autumn air reached Drusilla through the open cottage window as she opened the russet purse at her walnut desk. Inside were a butcher's bill, a coal merchant's receipt, and the smith's charge for oiling the village pump before winter. She smiled at the last one. The pump now worked with a clean, ordinary stroke. The estate's revised village scheme had funded several other repairs for less than the original allocations, because estimates came first and unused money returned quietly. The legitimate debts of her husband's estate had been discharged from rents and from property she had chosen to sell. Montague's advance had been repaid, the previous month, interest included. Its final receipt lay in the desk with the other finished estate papers not in the purse. Beside it rested the draft of her marriage settlement. The cottage and her separate funds would remain secured to her use. The settlement had not rescued the cottage. It had come afterward, when there was already something independent to protect. Beside the settlement lay Genevieve's list for the October wedding breakfast, with 2 additions in Montague's narrow hand, and 1 guest firmly crossed out by Drusilla. Genevieve had complained that the arrangements were almost offensively sensible. Drusilla considered this praise. A smell reached her through the open window. Smoke. Across the lane stood the old steward's lodge where Montague stayed when estate business kept him at Elmsworth. Grey smoke escaped its kitchen chimney in energetic puffs. Drusilla watched until he appeared at the back door, coughed, waved a cloth at the smoke, and vanished inside again. She looked at the meat pie cooling on her own table. Nothing required her to cross the lane. No creditor waited. No unpaid advance could be mistaken for gratitude. No lady in Brighton would ever know whether she fed him tonight or left him to the consequences of his confidence. She could eat the pie herself and see Montague tomorrow. Drusilla wrapped the dish in a clean cloth and crossed the lane. When she knocked, there was a clatter within and a muttered expression no duke ought to use within hearing of his future wife. Montague opened the door without his tailcoat. His sleeves were rolled, his cravat was missing, and flour marked one cheek. Behind him, a blackened crust occupied a table with the tragic dignity of a failed monument. "My pie," he said with grave formality, "is beyond diplomatic recovery." Drusilla raised the dish. "Your accounts are excellent, Montague. Your authority in a kitchen is imaginary." He looked at the pie, then at her. "Does this mean you are feeding me, Mrs. Talbot?" She could have reminded him that his cook returned in the morning. She could have made him wait. Neither choice would alter a debt, a lease, or the terms of their marriage. That was precisely the pleasure of it. Drusilla stepped across the threshold into smoke warmth and ruined pastry. "It means," she said, handing him the pie, "that I chose to come." The end.